case you're wondering what that is up there, there actually is a case, this relates to the issues we've been talking about. There was a case in Tennessee where apparently, this one area in Tennessee, you had to opt in to pay a $75 fee for the fire department to come and put out a fire at your place. This guy did not opt in. The fire department came to protect the neighbor's house because the neighbor had opted in. Unfortunately, the guy had not paid a fee. The fire department watched his house burn to the ground. You may do with that what you will in terms of this notion of what the provision of services are for state government or local governments. In fact, we talked about in the class under what extent should you have those kind of services that you have to opt in or opt out. Anyway, let's open up for questions. Barry, did you want to start off with one, or did you have any questions?
For the first time, I'm so mesmerized by these two speakers. I have questions.
Lord. All right, well, let's open up for questions from the audience. I'm just dumbfounded myself. So, questions for our speaker, or did you want to comment? Either one of our speakers want to comment to each other's talk first? Any follow-up comments?
One follow-up comment I think is important because we spent a lot of time talking about advice for the new governor, and is it Ruth who mentioned, came down and said, it's not just the governor, it's the legislature,
right.
And she couldn't be more right. Probably 80% of the legislators are going to be reelected, and it really is a state that requires strong leadership in the state house, in the governor's office, but also in the legislature. One without the other doesn't work, and to have both folks on both branches on board on this issue is critical for its success. So we should append advice to the state legislature as well as to the governor, if we should be so brazen.
And in addition to that, I think that what the traditional thought, conventional wisdom, is that that these are tough political fights. The bizarre thing, of course, is that I think that the politicians have it all wrong. And I served in the House back in the 80s, and I think that they have it all wrong. That in fact, it would be much more popular to actually take these issues on and deal with them than ignore them or to accommodate the special interests. And there are more votes to be had. Maybe fewer campaign donations, maybe fewer endorsements from the union PAC, but actually popular support would go up substantially, and I think that in the long run, the people would appreciate it, and more union jobs would be protected, because instead of paying for more benefits and fewer employees, you pay for sustainable benefits and more employees. And quite frankly, I think that those employees would appreciate it, and they'd show up in the voting booth and support of politicians. So it has to be the legislature. It has to be the governor. The governor has to model the way. But the strange thing is, it takes a little backbone, but I don't think it takes a backbone of steel, because you actually it's in the self-interest of the politicians.
John, you want to start off?
Yeah, I have a question. Given the difficulty of getting certain changes passed to the legislature, even if it would be in their self-interest, what do either of you think about changes through a ballot initiative or referendum on any number of people? Like, for instance, what if there's a ballot initiative that said it only required 50% of union approval, or didn't require union approval at all? It just gave municipalities the power to define their own health plans.
I'll take that one on first. And I think what's interesting is that I think the union should worry about that. I think there's been a shift in public perception of the issue and understanding. I think the unions might say, well, we can raise money from our nationals and so on, and they could spend, and they would spend $10 million to defeat the ballot question, which means that the chance of passing the ballot question would be probably 50-50 instead of a no-brainer. Maybe even it would be an uphill battle to pass it, just because the public sector can't, the city of Salem couldn't spend any money on the ballot campaign. It would have to be citizens. Ironically, it would probably be the Tea Party or people like that supporting it in a strange way, and there'd be some strange bedfellows in that way. But I think that because to truly tap into the public's unrest about this, my recommendation would not to have a ballot question simply on whether or not to allow health plan changes to take place outside of collective bargaining, but to deal with some of the other issues too. Put them together and have labor think twice about whether or not they're going to fight every single battle, potentially lose. It could be it could be, you know, tenure for underperforming teachers, where the public, 80% of the public supports eliminating that. It could be going to a 401k program for new hires instead of a defined benefit. I don't think there are a lot of municipal officials that would want to lead that kind of fight, but that's where the public is. And so I think that the special interests, and in this case it's the union, should be very wary about preserving the status quo, because the backlash, I think, naturally played out would do more than just accept the changes that we're looking for now, which are moderate changes. And so I think that there's a real possibility of that. The more the unions say no to moderate changes, no to moderate changes, no to moderate changes, then the public is going to say, then we're going to shake things up a bit. And it doesn't matter how much you spend to try and fight it. And quite frankly, then it would be the special interests, in this case the unions, that would be responsible for game changers and, quite frankly, doing some things that I think that a lot of us would be concerned about.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the initiative petition process, and I like representative democracy, but it's not working on this issue. And I hate to think that the only way it's going to get done is with an initiative petition. It's costly, it's divisive. I'm not trying to villainize public employee unions. This is just common sense, in my opinion. So I would fear that if we had a question like that, it pits folks in government versus folks not in government. And I want you to like your police force. I like teachers. I think they do amazing work. This is really just common sense. So I'd like to think we could figure this out through representative democracy, but I'm disheartened. And if the only way it's going to get done is through an initiative petition, I agree with Jeff. The scope will be much broader, and that pendulum will swing back, and it's not probably going to be what people would like. But that's going to take the legislature and the administration really stepping up to find a solution. If it's not the whole loaf, it's 3/4. It's somewhere there. I think short of that, you might see that occur.
Okay, let's open up. Right there.
I've been following the governmental governance debates over the last 3 weeks. I don't see many of these issues really coming up, other than the fact who's going to raise taxes more than the other person going to raise it. And the only question I have right now is, maybe there's no answer that you can give me at this point, but we have 3 candidates running for governor. If we had the 3 of them here right now and we pose these questions that you brought up here tonight, where would each of them stand?
Well, health insurance is a little bit off the topic of regionalism. I think what's interesting is that there be some sort of patterns, but I will talk a little bit about, just for a second, on health insurance. Charlie Baker is for plan design authority for cities and towns outside of collective bargaining, pretty clear, and says that he would champion it until it passes the legislature. The governor is more moderate and says that he would want labor at the table, and talks about how labor is at the table at the state level. Labor's at the table, but it's sort of like kids at Thanksgiving. They're at the kids' table. They don't actually make any decisions. They're on the GIC, but they have less than 30% of the vote on the GIC. It's a majority vote. The state gets to do whatever it wants. Governor's appointees rule the day, and they do plan design at will outside of collective bargaining. So the governor's trying to have a moderate position. He needs the support of the teachers and the unions in this election. I'm hopeful that his position will change and he will become stronger on this from the municipal perspective after the election. Tim Cahill started out being supportive at 2 forums that we held, saying that he was supportive of plan design authority. He didn't commit to it or pledge to it. I'm just going to, this is an academic environment, I'm going to just be honest with you. He has been endorsed by a number of police unions, and his position now is that there should be no change in plan design authority, and everything should remain fully in collective bargaining. He's a longtime believer in full collective bargaining. So the positions themselves are pretty clear. When it comes to issues like regionalism and giving communities more power and more authority, and supporting getting rid of the rules. We never see a governor's debate get to that. That's part of the reason why it needs to be something that a governor believes in, is something that a governor sets as not only a tone, but a real commitment as a partner. And I will just say honestly that Mike Dukakis is the greatest example of a partner to local government of any governor in the modern era. Absolutely, without exception. And because he would meet with local officials on the smallest issue. I saw him once meet for half an hour on the issue of stump dumps. What communities do, how to dispose of tree stumps, because it was very, very difficult to do. Communities have been burning them, they didn't want to burn them, all this stuff. And then he turned to his cabinet secretary and said, you come back with a plan to solve that. And the cabinet secretaries were charged with working with local officials to come up with a solution, report back, and they were accountable to the governor for a partnership. That's what we need the next governor to promise to do. Because a lot of these regionalism issues, they'll never make a governor's debate. They'll never really be in the public's mind except in certain situations. So it's really a nuts and bolts governor who's a partner and says, I'm going to help you solve that problem because I'm part of the problem. I have to become part of the solution with you. And that's what we're looking for from a governor.
Let me just comment a couple things. One, full disclosure, I'm a strong, unabashed supporter of Governor Patrick. I think he has made some really strong strides in a number of areas in terms of partnership. And I'm not going to parrot where everyone's at, 'cause I'm not even actually sure. I think Jeff did a pretty good job of laying out where folks are at on plan design, and regionalism doesn't typically get to the top of the debate list. I will say this, in some ways, it doesn't matter exactly where they're at. If you had Governor Smith, who came in and was a strong proponent of plan design, if you can't get the legislature to go along with it, you're not going to have anything happen. If you have Governor Smith, who came in and hated plan design, and you had a strong legislature who wanted to get it done, you need to have both those players. It's not going to happen there either. Both of them need to be on the same place. I will say this, Governor Patrick has been a really strong advocate of trying to work with cities and towns around a number of issues. He didn't cut local aid in his budget. He has provided dollars for real regionalization. We're doing regional dispatch in Essex County, virtue of grant dollars, E911 dollars, all those fees we pay on our cell phones coming to support that initiative. I served on a readiness program looking at how we can facilitate greater school collaboration. And what's the carrot and the stick? I think what we need to challenge our state elected officials is, look, some of this is, there needs to be some local autonomy. You can't just tell us what to do and suffer the consequences. There needs to be some incentive. If you said, if you regionalize a certain department, you'll stand to get a 10% increase in local aid, you'd find cities and towns doing circles around each other, trying to figure it out, and which worked for our community. To date, we haven't seen that sort of carrot and stick as much as we'd like. But there was legislation to allow cities and towns to join the GIC with negotiation with their collective bargaining agreement. I think 19 signed up. So I don't want to give anybody the impression that nothing's been done. It's just that not enough has been done. And I certainly hope going forward, whoever is in that office, I hope it's Governor Patrick, that we have an opportunity to work together with the legislature. We've got to hold everybody's feet to the fire for just common sense solutions. Next.
My question is, to what extent, if at all, can we utilize the regional planning agencies that exist throughout the state to kind of act as vehicles of regionalization and sort of a catalyst to get things going for communities?
Yeah, we've actually worked pretty closely with, in Salem and for the 128 Belton's MAPC, Metropolitan Area Planning Council. And I think where they have been most effective, and certainly could be even more so, is you want to think about regionalizing an area. Well, you really do need to scrutinize what's the level of service in each community, how many employees are involved, what do the collective bargaining agreements say, what's the funding source, what would the governance structure be going forward. You do need to lay that groundwork, and that's where MAPC has frankly been helpful. There have been funds that have gone to technical assistance to provide communities the tools they need to. We want to explore collaboration. Okay, I'm busy, you're busy, you're busy. Who's really going to take the bull by the horns and do it? That's where an MAPC can step in, get the data, put it together, come up with some recommended examples, and provide some of the roadmap that's necessary. And I think you're seeing that happening. More of it would be great. And again, some of those incentives would be wonderful. Incentives, the carrot and stick approach to try and get some of that change to occur. But we have seen that used with some very good success.
I think that technical assistance is probably the best area. There are some outside of this region and other parts of the state where the regional planning agency has thought that maybe they become the regional, like a county government, and become a service provider. But we've seen that the vertical models don't work. They're state agencies ultimately. They're primarily funded through state budgets with assessments paid by cities and towns. But the model of collaborative service delivery and collaborative transactions to figure out how to work on services at a horizontal level makes more sense, but the regional planning agencies can provide a great deal of assistance to facilitate in terms of resources, administer the technical assistance grants and so on. And they should do more of that because what they have done has been helpful.
Let me ask two interrelated questions. One, compared to national trends or norms, where is Massachusetts in terms of regional collaboration, in terms of taking advantage of these kind of opportunities? That's sort of one question. So where are we relative to other states? And related to that, what is the perception about the bang for the buck that we get for our local dollars in terms of service delivery, given everything we've talked about, compared to other places perhaps? So where do we stand in comparison to other places?
Two questions. Actually, part of it is we compare not favorably in terms of regional entities with other parts of the country, primarily because this is New England. This is our local governments go back hundreds of years, not 150 years or 125 years. And when we were formed as villages, and then go west, young person, right? And so our governments went west, and as they went west, and the states were formed, they were divided up into regional entities. And so what happens, regionalism is a part of their culture, but the regional government actually started out by providing more of the municipal services. There are fights nationally between in a lot of states, the municipal governments and the county governments. But those fights actually tend to happen in states that have a lot of unincorporated property. We don't know what that means here in Massachusetts because we don't even have any unincorporated land the size of a postage stamp. But in other parts of the country, there are a lot of areas where there's a county government provides services and there's no really active municipal government, and the question of annexation and incorporation are the issues that rule the day. So I think when we get compared to other states, in terms of the number of regional dispatch, number of schools, and so on, it's challenging. We need to really compare ourselves with other New England states, and there we compare okay. In terms of bang for the buck, we compare very favorably in great part because one, we're not California. We're the $1 million a year.
Thank God for California.
Right, for Bell, California. But also because of the New England culture of really being parsimonious, of really being pretty cheap, and especially in our town meetings, where our town meeting can spend 40 minutes on a $6,000 item and drive people absolutely bananas, and that's what the town meetings do. And that actually is something that at the municipal government level, we're known for really being pretty frugal and not for being spendthrift compared to the rest of the country, but we're also known for being more inefficient and not being regional.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's skewed a little to compare us to some of the states that follow county government. I actually grew up in Florida. I'm a Navy brat, so had the benefit of living in a number of different places, and it's completely different. Everything's a county government there. And I worked for a boss who used to say, if the country was developed west to east as opposed to east to west, all of New England would be one state. It's very different when you think about housing prices, cost of living, things like that do tend to skew sort of the delivery of services. I think that are usual if you're comparing private to public sector. But the parochialism has a price, and it's certainly one we hope we can overcome.
I just remember the best example of regionalization in Massachusetts. I will not name the two communities, but they decided to regionally collaborate on building a fire station. They both needed a fire station around the municipal border. It's 2 cities. And what they did was they said, okay, let's collaborate on building this facility so we can save architectural fees, design fees, land acquisition fees, construction, and so on. And they did. And we actually wrote it up in our monthly publication, The Beacon. And I was editing the story, and then I started to laugh because what they did was they did the service area was essentially, here's the service area for the fire station. There was a line that the station served 2 half circles. They built 2 exercise rooms, 2 kitchens, 2 sleeping quarters, 2 dispatch centers, 4 bays. And so it is sort of like a sitcom in many ways.
Was there masking tape going down the center?
That's right. Les Nessman would have loved it because it was from WKRP. Oh, you're too young a crowd. WKRP in Cincinnati. This guy had an imaginary office. So we can collaborate, but up to a point.
Barry.
Not a question, but you reminded me that I got involved in one of these. I actually have a house in Truro, and we have a meeting, and I am actually a resident of Truro. Some years ago, the state outlawed landfills, and every town and city needed to have a transfer station. And Truro was very effective at moving rapidly and building a transfer station with a wonderful compactor, and all kinds of recycling, and a swap shop. And in fact, it was so good, on July 4th, we used to have a square dance at the Dome. Provincetown, which is about 5 or 6 times larger than Truro, but directly to our north, was very slow in getting off the mark. And as the date of the mandatory closing of their landfill came, they came to Truro and said, could we share your landfill, your transfer station? And the object was is if we come, we will pay for all of the staff. We'll add an extra compactor, and but we use your site. Town meeting took this up over a period of 4 or 5 meetings lasting 5 or 6 hours each. And someone found out that I was an economist and asked if I would come in, since I was also a member of town meeting, and do an analysis of whether this was a smart thing for Truro, particularly a traffic analysis, because you have to, coming down from Truro, make a left turn on Route 6 into the transfer station. I was able to get data from the Cape Cod Commission to do that. And I came to the conclusion, based on the data they gave me, that in fact this would not be a serious traffic problem and that we could go ahead. I take this information to the town meeting. 600 people show up at a town meeting. I'm done. And I explain this.
Well, everybody in Truro.
It's a good number of them if you count just the living ones. And the result was I gave my report, and all of a sudden I'm being hissed and booed, and people would literally get up and say, you know, we don't want their trash. I mean, after all, that's Provincetown. I mean, we want that kind of class of trash. So I lost half my friends. A few weeks later, it was pointed out to me that the data I had gotten from the Cape Cod Commission was actually in error, that they had done this traffic study in January, when there's no one there. And so we got the new data, and I came to the conclusion that we'd probably have to put in a flashing yellow light or some kind of thing. And now there was a question about it. I took this to the town meeting, and now all the people who lauded me were angry at me. All the people who hated me from the first still have long memories. And it has taken me 12 years to rebuild friendships in Truro.
The beauty of direct democracy.
So are they taking their trash or not?
No, we actually denied it, and they built their own transfer station. Theirs is actually even more beautiful.
They showed you.
They have fireworks on the 4th of
If I haven't
July.
heard of a good reason to visit Truro or Provincetown, I don't know what is. With that, I think really good example of local. I'd like to thank all of you for making what could have been an eyes glazed over moment really informative. I'd like to thank our 2 guests for doing about as good of a job as they can.
See you next week.
And just to remind you, See you next week on Workforce Development, the Future of Massachusetts. See you then.